Hi, Mama.
Hi, sweetie. It is good to see you. And to all our listeners, welcome to the Mother Daughter Download, a podcast where this mother daughter duo meet at the intersection of leadership and sociology. We're on opposite coasts and of different generations. My name is Lisa, and after 20 years in executive HR roles, I have founded my own practice, Layup Coaching and Consulting.
Yes, and I'm Alex. I'm a sociology professor in the DMV area, Maryland, DC primarily. And together, my mom and I examine workplace dynamics, and we look at this through a human-centered and impact-driven lens. Our conversations are grounded in lived experience, research, and ongoing growth. We're not claiming universal truths, just offering reflections, insights, and looking to grow alongside with you.
So, in the episode today, number 7 of the Mother Daughter Download, where we'll continue the discussion on perfectionism. And I really enjoyed the last conversation. So, today we'll dig in further and explore the implications of perfectionism on mental health and share research and strategies that may offer insight and support. And I think this is incredibly important. We want to highlight we are not mental health professionals and really want to urge our listeners to seek professional help if needed.
Yeah, and so we really invite you to engage with us. Please share any insights, stories, questions in the comments. And you can find, of course, all of our episodes, our prior episodes on perfectionism on our YouTube channel, The Mother Daughter Download. And you'll also find any references or research that we refer to in the description, so you can look there to kind of continue your learning experience. Please do like, subscribe, and share. And with that, we will dig in.
So as we were, of course, on our own doing research and having conversations about this episode, I went back and revisited something that you had uncovered last time, which was the article, Perfectionism is Increasing Over Time. And you shared a lot of great data from that. As I looked at it, I learned about this tool called the Multidimensional Perfectionism Scale. So couldn't help myself, went, of course, to dig into this assessment, to take it myself, and got some results, which I know we'll end up getting into in this conversation. And I'm smiling because, of course, we are, of course, exposing the soft underbelly of our own perfectionist traits. And we all have them. And I know we're going to talk about, again, both the positive and negative side of this. So really want to just offer that up, that will be in the research too, if in the notes, if folks would like to explore themselves. But at the top of this call, let's start with Alex, the research that you conducted and what evidence is out there that connects perfectionism to mental health.
All right, so again, in the research, kind of recapping from our last podcast, the 3 types of perfectionism that we were talking about there were self-oriented perfectionism, which is setting extremely high, sometimes unrealistic expectations and goals on ourselves. We have other-oriented perfectionism, which is us actually putting and projecting those unrealistic standards onto other people, even people that we love or people that work for us, right? And then we also have socially prescribed perfectionism, which is kind of tapping into what we think society or others want from us. This is sometimes measured by what we think our parents want for us or our friends want from us, or even really comparing ourselves to other people online. And so we have seen research that says that perfectionism has increased over time and increases throughout younger generations as well. So younger generations struggle with perfectionism more, specifically socially prescribed perfectionism. Because I think about me even being in middle school, and I didn't really have like social media like that until maybe like halfway through high school. The people that I compared myself to were the people at my school. Whereas kids nowadays, like your third, fourth, fifth grade with a cell phone, and you can see people globally. So that socially prescribed perfectionism is a lot higher because we have so many people to compare ourselves to. And so then going into something else interesting that I didn't really know about until a couple days ago, because we were preparing for this podcast and we were like, let's do some research into mental health implications, right? And so what I found is that there's positive and negative perfectionism. So there's positive perfectionism, which has more to do with having high levels of personal standards for yourself and trying to be the best that you can be. And I've had conversations with you, Mom, and with friends where it's like, I really want to be, for example, for me, I want to be the best teacher that I can be, but I'm not striving for perfectionism in every class. I know that with every class, I'm going to learn something from it, right? There's going to be mistakes had, and I'm going to improve from those for next time. So I'm not really trying to be perfect, but I hold myself to a high standard. That would be kind of more so a positive or normal perfectionism. And so then
Mm.
there's also negative, sometimes called neurotic perfectionism. This one has more to do with maladjustment. This one has more to do with negative affect, perpetual worries about making mistakes, uncertainty and fear of kind of others' perspective on you. And this is where we kind of see that disharmony between expectations and results. This is the type of perfectionism that is associated with negative mental health outcomes in terms of mood disorders, anxiety disorders, personality disorders, eating disorders, et cetera, et cetera. So we see with but what's interesting is positive perfectionism actually has a positive correlation with psychological well-being, and it
Mhm.
actually mitigates psychological distress. So there are two different types of perfectionism. One of them is adaptive, one of them is not.
Yeah. And interesting, Alex, just to add to your research and again, the understanding and again, I'm deepening my understanding and some of the things that I was looking at and what you're describing is so on the more positive side of the striving, there can be confidence in your actions as well as thinking about the imperfections, allowing me to continue to learn and develop. And on the other side is that I'm doubting my actions, and the focus is on what I'm getting wrong,
Yes.
and so on. So continue, but I
Yeah.
really, I love this distinction.
I think it's a great way to put it where it's almost like, what is the focus on? Is the focus on where we're falling short? Or are we putting that in a perspective of, this is where I fell short, that's room for growth? Right. So I think that we can all have these situations where we make mistakes. But are we to think about it like, oh, wow, I'm a horrible human being? And in psychology, we call this catastrophizing, right? You can think
Mm.
about like as a student, for my students, if you get an F on a test, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to fail this class. Or, oh my God, I'm a horrible student. And it's like, oh my gosh, don't internalize one wrong thing. It means that that's a section or an area that you need to focus in on more and improve, right?
Mhm.
So one of the other couple of things I just saw was that speaking about students, we see that again, it can be adaptive for some students or maladaptive for some students, depending on again, kind of like your perspective and how you're dealing with these things. And then again, going into because I really like to talk about generations, I mentioned this earlier, but there's plenty of research that says that everyone struggles with perfectionism, but again, it's more so that socially prescribed perfectionism that younger generations are struggling with more. And I think that has to do with social media. And that leads to things like eating disorders or, again, like catastrophizing or these kind of maladaptive tendencies. And the one other thing that I'll mention, kind of connected to mental health a little bit, is that we see that people with adaptive perfectionism don't struggle with alcohol usage as much as people who are either categorized as non-perfectionists or people who are maladaptive perfectionists. So we see personality disorders, we see eating disorders, we also see like tendencies to use substances. And so we just bring that up because it's important to kind of think about where you are and how we can improve from there to make it so that your perfectionism is a little bit more adaptive.
No, that's a great overview of it. And again, it's I think I was surprised with all that you've uncovered of seeing this link to mental health. But when I think about it, you know, on the coaching side of the work that I do and working with leaders who are always striving for excellence, what you just described, there's that very fine line because, of course, people are encouraged to strive for excellence. You set a goal, you want to achieve it. And I think, but it's important to stay true with, and I think these are some of the things that you ground you in the healthy side of perfectionism is grounded in purpose, grounded in your values,
Yeah.
grounded in recognizing progress, right? That we talked about that last time, progress over perfection, and celebrating those milestones. All of those things I think are very healthy ways to, again, take care of your well-being. And I know we're going to get into this a little bit too. It's also the self-talk that you give yourself that I think adds also to the positive side. Because again, on the negative side, it's just, it's also, when you think about it, if there's this like ideal, perfect result, that's kind of elusive and doesn't even exist. So when we were thinking about and kind of pulling this together, we said we wanted to look at the implications of mental health on, again, the individual level, workplace, and societal level before we start talking about our results on the assessment. But on the individual level, and Alex, I think you already began to uncover and share some of these stats, but high level, it's connected to self-worth, right? So let's think about, again, grounding your self-worth in, again, values, purpose, and so on, versus just the final result. Because if it's always the goal, you're missing the joy of learning. You're missing the joy of progress. You're missing the joy even of connection. Let's say of, thinking of accomplishing something fun, a good project, whatever it might be, in or outside of work. And I think the important thing, thinking about one of the studies that was uncovered, we found that perfectionism is linked to some of these, again, things that you've mentioned already: insomnia, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, even self-harm. So it's pretty scary, again, if it goes to this extreme. And when our inner critic becomes the primary motivator, that's when mental health suffers. Do you have anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I wanna go back to just our comment in the beginning about please do reach out to a
Mm,
mental health professional if you feel like you're having any of these feelings, right? And I do think it has to do with positive self-talk, right? And how are we to reframe these certain phrases to be positive and progressive and adaptive for us? And that's something that's not easy for everybody, of
right.
course. So again, I'm like, I would really encourage a therapist even just to kind of help you reframe the way that you think about yourself and your mistakes and your progress and your achievements and how you can practice like positive self-talk. So whether that's reading more about it or reaching out to a mental health professional, reframing those thoughts about ourselves I think is really important.
And I know that in prior conversations, when we think about perfectionism in its, again, implications in the workplace, it looks like overfunctioning and people pleasing and burnout. And I can
Burnout,
relate
right?
to
We talked
this.
about that. Yep.
And yes, and have experienced this.
Yes.
And, I know that there was some interesting data in a particular article that we pulled from this Jeffrey Pfeffers. It's called Dying for a Paycheck. And he talks about that it can happen within, let's say through neglect, or again, creating a culture of competition or a culture of fear, that people are not going to thrive, and people truly can get, physically, emotionally, mentally sick in such an environment. And again, that toxic perfectionism really feeds that burnout culture.
Yeah, yeah. And I think neglect is a key word there in terms of neglecting our own
Mm,
needs. And like you said, going back to the adaptive perfectionism is grounded and rooted in our values and our beliefs, primarily our values, right? Like, so we can feel good
yeah.
about that. But when we are so hyper focused on that kind of socially prescribed, whether that's what you think that your boss wants of you, or what you think that your colleagues or coworkers want from you, or whether I think that's what my bosses and my students want from me, right? If we hyper
Mhm.
focus on that, we're going to neglect our own values and beliefs and the way
Yeah.
that we kind of want to do things. And we
Yeah.
don't want to lose ourselves in this pursuit of perfectionism, which is, like you said, elusive and really not realistic.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that on a personal level, right, like you need to be able to be in tune with that. And if you're not, then I encourage you to go just Google a list of values and take down a list of
Name it.
5, 10 that you like, and that will really help you ground yourself in your actions. But
Yeah.
also, again, going back to like workplace scenario, and neglect, also not neglecting people as a leader, right? And their needs and checking in with people as to what it is that they need or want and what
Yeah.
motivates them. Because Mama, I would ask you, like, I would think that if you were a leader and you're kind of in tune with what motivates your client, your employees, or for you, your clients, right? Isn't that like probably the first step of what you do is you look at like their values and what motivates them and you kind of tap into that, I would assume would bring more
Yeah.
productivity to the workplace.
I think it's a great thing just to bring up, and I love your reminder of saying, like, let's name our values and know them. But I think this happens, and this happened to me in my own career journey, is you end up, and let me go back to the phrase of people pleasing,
Yeah.
very much a people pleaser. And I very much wanted, was striving for, let's say, attention or accolades or feedback from my boss. And when I centered that, and that goes back to Alex, what's the term? Is it other like I guess I was looking for, again, ensuring that I was meeting some standards by, and it was elusive because I wasn't even asking. So if I had grounded myself to values, which is again, the work that I do with leaders now, because again, you can be far along in your career and have lost your way because we get caught up with a lot of external things, external pressures, other people that we're trying to please or satisfy. And it's such important work when we can name our values, whether that is about integrity or teamwork or collaboration or simplicity or zest. And I'm thinking a couple of mine. And then that helps guide also decisions, but it can guide satisfaction as well. And you know that you're doing the right thing or making the right decisions based on those values. So I appreciate you bringing it up. I think it's an
And I do
important
think
part.
with the socially prescribed thing, what I think is the most interesting is it tends to be what we perceive, what we think people want from us,
Yeah,
what we think society wants from us, what we think our boss wants from us. And I do think that like if you're struggling with that, it might be a good opportunity to go talk to your boss. What is it that you're looking for? Like, what is it that you need from me? What is it that would be, this level, this level, this level in terms of achievement or getting work done or like whatever, and really checking in so that you have objective measures of what you're supposed to be doing versus just sitting there and ruminating on it,
so true.
ruminating on what you think that they want and striving for this, again, elusive level of perfectionism that might not even be
Yeah,
standards that are being set for you. Like again, like I think
exactly.
a lot of the time it can be what we're thinking other people want from us. And that
That's
can get
right.
really messy. It can get really
Hmm.
messy, really detrimental to somebody.
Just trying to finish again those three segments. Do you want to take us into the societal level and how that shows up? And
Yeah. And as kind of said, like society, it's hard, especially with social media. I'm thinking like younger generations and again having everybody to compare ourselves with. And I think even you're on TikTok, right? Older people are on TikTok, people are online,
I
and
want to see what you're doing.
it's easy to true. I think you just like Cam and I's
I
videos.
do.
You're so cute. I love you so much. But I think that it is really difficult, especially for younger people. And even like I've told you this, when I have my older students, they're pretty consistent about the fact that as you get older, you're kind of more assured of your own beliefs and values, and you kind of don't really care about what other people think of you as much. And not necessarily in a workplace manner, but in general, right? But I think younger people are really concerned and might overthink it, and I think they can be detrimental to them. And so
Yeah.
I would just say that, like, perfectionism, of course, is rooted in cultural narratives, norms, values of the dominant culture, which tends to be, in our society, we live in kind of a patriarchal, white supremacist type society. So
Mhm.
we see that, especially at work in general, that these kind of values are reflected. And it can be really
Mhm.
hard if you're a minority of some sort and having to adjust to that. And so I would just say that, like, I would just suggest as a leader that we have to be aware of people with different backgrounds and different perspectives and where they're coming in, and that there might be an adjustment period for
Yes.
that. In terms of another couple of words I'll bring in is assimilation versus acculturation. So
Hmm.
assimilation, we see this a lot with, let's just say, like immigrants coming to the US. Assimilation kind of means that you kind of have to drop your own cultural values and beliefs, maybe language, maybe traditions, to kind of assimilate and fit in with the larger dominant society, cultural values and norms. Whereas acculturation is the goal. Acculturation is both the minority and the majority coming together and saying, how can we marry our different traditions, rituals, values, beliefs, so that we can both learn from each other and so that you're not losing yourself coming here.
Yeah.
And so I think that would be a really cool thing to think about as a leader or in a workplace, acculturation. How can we make sure that we're bringing in people of diverse backgrounds and making sure that we're not asking them to lose themselves,
Yeah.
not ask them to drop how they do things. How can we maybe learn from the way that they do things? Maybe they're from a different country. Maybe they're from a
Right.
different cultural background. What might we have to gain from that rather than just enforcing and pushing the same values and ideas? Because how do we get ingenuity from that? How do we get
Hmm.
creativity from that? Like we're limiting that. And I think that's limiting for the workplace in general. So I'm just saying that like it can be difficult socially, especially for like minority populations and communities, and having to kind of feel like you have to like delete parts of yourself to fit in and just be accepted in a workplace. And I just would ask, for leaders to maybe gear themselves more towards acculturation in terms of how can we take your cultural norms and values This is also cultural relativism. This is also cultural competency, right? Thinking
Mhm.
about people's backgrounds and how can we incorporate those into our practice here
Yeah.
for the benefit of everybody. And
Yeah,
so I would,
I agree. And yeah, I just want to share, and there's lots, so much good content there. And I know that we'll have a link to this article. I'm thinking about, I've had a lot of amazing people in my life who have helped me generate additional awareness on my own journey. And I just want to have a shout out to Kamara Sika, who's been amazing. And, but also recognizing, Alex, again, when you talked about the dominant culture within society and being influenced by those norms, which naturally is one of them, perfectionism and striving for that one right way. And then the other one, again, I just want to highlight because I wrestle with it all the time, is that sense of urgency
yeah.
of like, it always has to be done fast, and getting caught up in that. So I just want to kind of share a couple of examples of my own sense of getting caught up in those norms. But
And you said that to me a lot about prioritizing things. And it's like, how urgent is it really?
yeah. Yeah.
How urgent is it really? And prioritizing based off that.
So let's think about if we're ready to think about the assessment tool. So I want to just share and then ask you some questions, and I'll share a couple of things. But when I went through and took the assessment, got the results, I was like, wow. So let me just share with the listeners. The link will be in our notes. You'll be able to go take a look yourself. And what it ends up giving you is a total perfectionism score. And then it breaks it into four categories that would influence, again, where you might fall on the scale. So one of them is concern over mistakes and doubts about actions.
Which would be the self-oriented.
The second one is parental expectations and criticism,
That's socially prescribed.
personal standards,
Also self-oriented.
and then organization.
Also self-oriented. I did read into the methodology a little bit today. That organization one is not actually included in the over total score of perfectionism. It's almost like a
Mm,
separate one, but I think it's still interesting to look at your organization score and see where you are there, and if
yeah,
yeah, if you
yes.
some improvement there or what.
So I know that we had some fun with this, and then I'll share, and then I guess I also wanted to share kind of a reflection because I guess what we're doing with this work and want to share with our listeners is what's out there in terms of research, information, trends, assessments that can help you reflect for yourself as a professional, as a leader, to then again how you're showing up differently within the workplace, managing your career, and again owning yourself and owning efforts to think about whatever adjustments for, we hope, brings you a little bit of more peace and contentment and joy in the learning process. So when I took a look, I'll just share my highest percentile was on personal standards at a whopping 98%. And then I said, Alex, what do you think about that?
Do you want to tell them like what your overall kind of feeling was? Because I don't know if you were, how did you, wait, you're
My
talking about parental, wait, which one did you just say?
I was sharing my highest one, my highest
Was,
out of the four categories was personal standards.
and for
So
me, mine was parental expectations and criticism. And like not to, in the nicest way, my parents had high standards for me. As they, you know what I mean? As they should, right? But so that was kind of my highest one, which was the, again, the socially prescribed, and yours is more so the self-oriented, which was interesting.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
and I think like in here we are, we're mother and daughter, and I think that I want to say thinking about your own results saying like, oh geez, I was really responding to the parental expectations. I think that I'm going to own, wow, could there have been adjustments so that you didn't feel as much pressure? And maybe just the recognition when we talk about perfectionism in any way is, are there more options, right? That's stepping back again, just one absolute way. And I know that we talked a lot about like, well, you're going to college. There really wasn't an option. So I want to own that. But if we're going to, again, sharing our own results and experiences, but then also thinking about what are my learnings? And if I went back and had conversations with you, I think I'd like to think about were there more options to consider, right? Because then you don't get so hung up in one way. But what's your take? And I guess Any other surprise on your results as you sat with them?
My take to like be open for people who are also going to take this quiz after watching this is that the questions weren't negative. Like they weren't necessarily
Hmm.
some, I wouldn't say that this means that I felt that y'all weren't doing it right, but I felt like y'all had high expectations for me, which I think can and is very positive. And because of your high expectations, I had high expectations of myself and also high belief in myself because y'all
Mm.
believed in my sister and I. And I didn't think that your expectations came out of disappointment or negativity. I think your expectations came out of this is what we want for you and we know that you can do it. And so I'm not saying it's necessarily negative, but that's a factor, right? How you think other people are perceiving you and whether that motivates you or puts you down. And so I think if we're talking like in a leader type sense, you would have high expectations of your employees, of your colleagues, but how are we communicating those? Are we
Yeah.
putting people down? Are we threatening? Are we being negative? Are we, you know what I mean? We go back to like operant conditioning, right? When we talk about I'm trying to say punishment versus reward.
Hmm.
Rewards tend to motivate people more than not, right? And so like for example, I'll just say, I did feel like sometimes I'll just say that like if you were to tell a kid, I'll give you $20 for every A that you got on your report card. That's to motivate them more so than like being like if you don't get all A's, you're gonna be grounded, right? Reward oriented feedback tends to
Yeah.
be more effective and motivates people for the long term, right? Because
Yeah.
let's say I'm a kid and I'm working in school and I know, oh my God, if I get an A in this class, I'm gonna get $20.
Yeah.
That can kind of motivate me throughout the semester versus if I'm like, oh, I know I'm gonna get punished if I don't get an A. That actually kind
Yes.
of makes people anxious.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's the mental health again. And I want to add to that.
Right.
That's such a great example, Alex. And it translates to the workplace.
Yeah.
And a very important aspect of HR work is reward and recognition
Yeah.
and supporting leaders and supporting the organization to have healthy reward and recognition systems in the organization. And one of them I would often talk with the leaders of the organization is remember positive reinforcement is free. So it ironically that one doesn't even cost anything. Again, there's other methods, but just the idea of actually really truly recognizing someone's efforts and calling it out.
I think that's
Yes.
important. And I want to like bring up something that like millennials and Gen Z kind of complain about. So we are upset about, oh, you did a good job. Here's an end of the year pizza party.
What would you like?
Come on, like, come on. First of all, a raise, maybe. But what you just said, recognition in terms of feedback. Feedback is so important.
It
I'd
is.
rather have like thought out,
Yeah.
really intentional, like really thinking my boss really thought about how I did this semester.
Yep.
And mom, I just sent you, I was really, really proud. I cried. You have it on your fridge. At Howard, my boss wrote me a review and it was really important to me because my boss is the same person who accepted me into my master's degree at Howard that
Mm.
just wrote this review for me as a teacher
Yeah.
now at Howard. And it was just so kind. She paid attention to my teaching skills, to the reviews that my students gave me, to my syllabus, to the assignments. Like she brought in all these little things that I didn't even think she was paying attention to. It was
Yeah.
really complimenting me and being specific with
Mm.
her feedback about what was good. And that made me like I cried. Like I that felt
Mm.
so good. So acknowledgement and not just like good job, but like real specific feedback and acknowledgement I think is more important than like let's just say a pizza party.
Yeah.
Um, so I think really taking the time to give people personalized feedback, I think
Hmm.
weighs more than people think.
Yes. And when we think about what's happening in the workplace in terms of what leaders want to happen, which is commitment and engagement and the innovation, is this opportunity to just pay attention to people. And I loved how you said that, just attention and noticing. And there's this tremendous book out there by Daniel Pink called Drive, which is like what's really motivating people. And it's not, it's yes, money matters. You need to be earning a living and so on. But the things that intrinsically, it is about development, meaningful work? And yes, do I have this partnership with my boss, like that this person cares about me, cares, there's connection and compassion in terms of the individual. Before we leave the assessment, I just want to say, like, to other folks who might consider it, before we get into kind of strategies for the workplace to consider, I just some questions, like, because I thought we had some time to sit and digest our results and talk, but when you are looking at them for yourself, and thinking about making any changes, think about and reflect for yourself, what are my choices and what are my habits? And then am I getting help as needed? I think that's a big thing about perfectionism too. People are not asking for help or admitting like what they need, or again, making those small adjustments or building new habits. So think about that. And then also think about the story you might be telling yourself about perfect. What does that mean, really? And dig into that. And I do that with leaders. That's a lot of the work that I do, is like really sitting and reflecting on the story that we're telling ourselves. Is it true? Is that enough? So I just wanted to throw a couple of questions there before we dig into our strategies. Did you
Yeah,
have any other thoughts before we move into our this section?
I love that. No, my only thought is that in the most complimentary way. Like I think of my mom, I've always thought like you are, and it's me being a daughter. I'm like my mom's perfect, right? I think my mom's so perfect. I think everything you do is so perfect. And I've kind of always thought of you as like someone of a higher caliber. Like everything you do is done
Yes.
well, and I strive to be like that. You're a great example, and I love that. But it was so funny when I got my results and I was higher on the perfectionism scale than you. I was a little surprised. And that's why I think it's important to take self assessments, not only in
Yes.
perfectionism, but in all sorts of things, because you might get results that you're not expecting. You might have to sit with that and
Mm,
think about how does this show up in my life? Because I would not consider myself a perfectionist. And so taking
yeah.
this test really helped me reflect and be like, wait, where am I doing this in my life? And how can I just pay attention to that and make
Yeah.
slight changes moving forward in the way that
Yeah.
I talk to myself and to
Yeah.
others?
No, I love it. I want to share one other thing because I told you I really reflected after getting this. And again, remember, my personal standards was the highest. And I was thinking about, I went to a networking meeting recently, just in the last 2, 3 weeks. And it was this coaching networking group. And it's just a wonderful group to like learn. And I was putting out there, I'm like, oh, well, I'm trying this and I'm trying this, whatever the challenge is that I was sharing. And the person was listening to me, and
Yeah.
it's amazing what others can hear. And this very thoughtful colleague of mine said, Lisa, it sounds like you're being really hard on yourself. So it was just fascinating to hear. So, what was she doing for me? She was mimicking almost my self-talk. So,
Okay.
which I don't even hear, which, like, looking at my results, is probably too damn high,
Right.
which is a reminder to what's enough.
Yeah.
And go and me having to practice some of the things that we're sitting here talking about, which is,
Yeah.
hey, you probably did a lot this week. So I just wanted to share
Yeah.
that story. I'm on my own journey in working. Yeah. So some of the strategies that we can think about, again, implication, knowing that they can link to mental health, and we want to get in front of that. So what are some things that we can experiment with? You might have heard me talk about adopting a growth mindset. This is about looking at those errors or mistakes or things that don't go exactly as planned as learning lessons. It's not always going to be perfect and flawless, and looking at it more as what's the progress and what are the milestones. And Alex, I know that we were talking about, and you really love the word discernment. So I'm just going to have you kind of jump in there and like, I don't know, what is that? I love the word as well, but I'm wondering if you're kind of how you bring it into your life and
Um,
your
we
weekly.
love the word because you just taught me it like 2 weeks ago. Like, and now I love it. Like, it's such an important word.
It's a
And
good
I really
word.
have to understand, like, yeah, you have to understand how would you explain it? Like, just like really being aware of the scenario or the context that you're in and how you're moving
Yeah.
there.
In making the call on, like, so for example, this goes back to priorities, right? And not everything is going to, goes back to the energy and effort that we give it. You were talking about this, Mom, when I do some editing, I'm not going to like give it a 10. Maybe I'm going to give it a 7. But Mom, when I do my research, I'm likely going to give it a 10.
Right,
So
right.
there's the discernment, same thing like in relationships, right? We are going to, again, put energy and effort, of course, into our most important relationships. But so I always kind of think about that's when we have to kind of put discernment into our priorities. And
And in
again, what
this
are we cultivating?
context, yeah, in this context, discernment is important in terms of are you making moves and choices and decisions and actions based on impressing yourself, making yourself proud,
Mhm.
or are you working on something thinking about the other perspective? And it's really, really hard to work on something and put genuine effort and thought into it if you're just really thinking about how someone else is going to perceive it, right? And you have to think about how other people perceive whatever you're doing, whether it's an essay that you're writing for a teacher, or how I'm teaching a class, or how you're doing a project at work. But I think if you're genuine to yourself and your own values, then it's gonna come out as fantastic. And again, we have to allow ourselves rooms to try new things and to use different strategies. And because you got to think, when you let's say you just start in a workplace, you don't know what your best methods are going to be yet. Like you really have to mess around and kind of practice with different methods of doing things before you kind of find something that speaks to you. And
That's
so
right.
whatever, trying to figure out like what you're doing there. But another big thing I just thought under adopt a growth mindset, like we said, don't internalize mistakes.
Mm,
Again, catastrophizing. This
yeah.
mistakes don't define you. Mistakes push you. Mistakes push you. And that's how you learn. If you just stay in the safe lane the whole time, you're gonna be a basic employee doing basic work.
Yeah.
And it's I think it's scary because as an employee, if you do something different, I can either be met with criticism or praise. And you don't know, but you won't know until you try. And again, I hope as a leader, you would be allowing your employees to try and give them
Hmm.
room to be creative and to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's really all I kind of have to say there is just
Yeah.
that, be the best that you can be. And if you're thinking about perfectionism, it's gonna hinder that. It's gonna
I
hinder
agree.
it's
Yeah.
gonna hinder
I agree.
creativity. Yeah.
Yeah, well said. Another one here, and I'll admit my own challenge of trying to sit with this, which is feel and name emotions, because that allows you to work through something, right? And we're talking about what can naturally creep up on all of us is a level of anxiety, right? We can be anxious in terms of our performance or this perfectionism or these, ideal standards. So anxiety can often cover up these other feelings. So if we can pause and just kind of sit with, trying to just pay attention to what our body is telling us. I just had a conversation with my dear friend Pam this week. She was reminding me to do this and to just really sit with your feelings. Being able to name it allows us to work through it. Then I wanted to also mention practicing self-compassion. This is a big one because, and I was reading further, and this will be one of the articles that we will put into the notes, is I think when people are wrestling, we can offer so much compassion and support to them, but we don't offer that to ourselves as much.
Mhm.
So I think this idea of actually trying to practice the way that we would encourage a friend or support a friend, trying to use that same language ourselves. And I'm wondering, Alex, if you have any reaction to that, because again, I think it's a powerful thing that can weigh us down the way we talk to ourselves.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the way that we talk to ourselves is just really important. But I do think that's just easier said than done. And again,
Yeah.
that's where I'm like, work with a therapist, someone like a consultant, somebody close with you. Talk to a friend, talk to whoever, like your mom, someone that you trust to have a more realistic, almost perspective of you. Because I feel
Mhm.
like you can be really difficult on yourself. But then when I talk to people like you or my friends, or I look at my reviews for teaching or whatever,
Yeah.
it can give me something more objective. Um, and of course, my mom's be biased, my friends would be biased, everyone's gonna be biased to some degree, but that's why it's important to get perspectives from so many different people, from my
Yeah.
bosses, from
So
my
true.
family members, from my loved ones. And
Hmm.
that will kind of give you a better view of yourself because I think we are hypercritical of ourselves.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
course, just naturally we are.
Yeah.
So I just think that yeah, practicing self-compassion is is
It's
really important, and getting feedback from multiple different people, even if you're
agree.
at work, but you have other places that you volunteer or other people that you, whatever, like get feedback from everybody
Hmm.
and take what works for you and leave what doesn't. And I kind of
Hmm.
mentioned, or I wanted to mention, kind of like ad hominem attacks in terms of logical
Hmm.
fallacies. And what I mean by that is people kind of coming at you for personal things versus actually giving constructive criticism. And so be aware of that too. That comes back to discernment in terms of if you have someone who's coming at you and giving you quote unquote feedback that is very much personally based, like you have to be aware of not taking that personally, because that's
Yeah.
not, you have to know the difference between constructive criticism and personal criticism,
Yeah.
and don't internalize the personal stuff, but take the critical stuff and use that. I have to do that every semester with my reviews. I would say 90% of the time students are very positive. There's always be one kid per class who's mad. They're probably mad because they didn't get a great grade. And they're to
Yeah.
say something in there that's cruel towards me as a person. I don't like her. She's whatever. Da 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 da. And I have to discern, this is just someone who's angry right now, who doesn't like me as a person, and I can't really change that. But then I have all this other feedback that's constructive criticism that's going to help me grow. So I'm
Yeah.
just saying, don't dwell on those type of things. And
Yeah.
if you're in a workplace, I'm sorry, that's coming at you personally rather than providing you constructive criticism. Red flag. Red
Yeah.
flag.
Yeah, I agree. And yeah, and then the last one I'll just offer as you're thinking about again, just your own awareness is to also like thinking about your relationship to work. Because and we've talked about this before, it can't it was for me at one point just fully your identity. There's other aspects of you. So thinking about those other aspects and cultivating them again, your hobbies, your interests, your health, all of that is matters in terms of balancing and ensure that again your mental health you're taking care of that just as we're trying to take care of our physical health. So I think that I will toss it over to you in terms of some of the conclusions for today.
Yeah. So again, some of the things that we've really focused on is adopting a growth mindset, feeling and naming emotions, also naming your values, practicing self-compassion, seeking feedback from a variety of people, seeking connection, genuine connection,
Hmm.
reevaluating your relationship to work and what that means to you, and prioritizing correctly, or just working on what is a priority and naming that for yourself, modeling vulnerability for leaders, creating psychological safety in your workplaces, leading with compassion, balancing standards with humanity. We can't expect our workers to be robots. They're not.
Hmm.
They're people. These are people with real emotions and other responsibilities in real worlds outside of the workplace. Like the workplace is
Yeah.
just 40 hours a week. They have a whole other life with other things that you probably don't even know what's going on. Maybe
Hmm.
ask people, I don't know, whatever. But understand that people are humans and they have other things going on in life. So we can't be perfect all the time.
Hmm.
But then I would also just say, yeah, that again, there's positive and negative perfectionism. Some of it's adaptive, some of it's not. But hyper focus on perfectionism will hinder improvement. You need to take risks, make mistakes, trust yourself, allow yourself some growth, allow yourself room to improve, allow yourself to make mistakes because that's how we learn. But otherwise, do you have any other comments before I kind of wrap it up?
I'm going to let you take it away, but you know what I'm going to say? Well, I
Yeah.
thought that we had fun at the beginning going, are we going to have a perfect episode? So I hope we had a learning episode. That's what I want to leave us with.
Yes, to be so vulnerable every time we do this, we're like, I don't know, we're a little bit nervous. We're like, let's see. But we've found, Mom, I think that we've made mistakes and we've learned from those, and we're to grow every episode. And we're still in the beginning of our experience here. Like this is episode 7. But even
Mhm.
today, when we got into this episode, we were talking about how do we cut down our intro? Because our intro
Right.
is 2 minutes right now, which is a bit too long, right? A little bit too long. Like we gotta get into people's attention spans. And so we're working on that. And
We're
we don't have
working on it.
yet. We don't. But we will soon. Or we're gonna learn. I would assume that it's never gonna be perfect. We're always gonna have to kind of work and grow, and we're to find places to improve and how to be better.
It's an iterative process.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. So we're there with you. Perfectionism isn't the goal. The goal is to learn and to grow. So with that, thank you for joining us in
definitely.
this conversation. If you have any
Yeah.
questions, suggestions, even stories. Oh, sorry, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we say to our listeners that we do want questions and stories because that's what we'll end up covering in our next episode. So
Exactly.
absolutely, any stories and your with perfectionism,
Yeah.
how you've overcome or questions for us, we welcome it. And
Yeah.
again, that will build our next episode.
Whether it's that you have questions about how to handle it, or even if you have suggestions on how to handle it, we would love to have those again in the comments, or you can email us at the mother-daughter-download@gmail.com, because what we've been doing is kind of a three-part series. Our third part is addressing all of your questions and stories. So we're really looking forward to that, and we look forward to seeing you in part 3 of our perfectionism series. And
See you next
otherwise,
time.
see you next
Excellent.
time.